The galaxy waited for peace. Inside the Great Hall of Concord, leaders from dozens of empires gathered. The chamber was larger than any cathedral on Earth, its ceiling made of transparent crystal, showing the stars beyond. For centuries, the galaxy had been torn apart by war. Worlds burned, fleets vanished, and treaties collapsed again and again. At last, the rulers came together for one final attempt to end the bloodshed. Each delegation sat in silence, their guards watching, their translators whispering in low tones. Tall insectoid monarchs stood beside pale-skinned scholars from distant systems. Cold-eyed reptilian warlords glared across the chamber at feathered diplomats who once fought against them. Even here, under the banner of peace, there was no trust. A single voice broke the silence. The speaker of the Concord called out, "Today we choose peace or we choose extinction." His voice echoed against the crystal walls. Some nodded. Others smirked. Everyone knew this meeting was fragile. A single insult could shatter it. Then a low murmur spread across the hall. It began with one delegate looking down at their comm screen, then another, then another. Soon, every representative was reading the same urgent transmission. Their expressions shifted from annoyance to alarm. "Humans," one of the reptilian lords spat. "They have arrived." The name carried weight, but not respect. Humanity was young, barely a century into interstellar travel. To the great empires of the stars, Earth was nothing more than a stubborn frontier race. They had no seat in the conquered. They had no right to be here. "How did they even know of this meeting?" whispered a feathered diplomat. No one had the answer. The speaker raised his hand for silence, but it was already too late. The doors of the great hall trembled. Guards rushed to their weapons, but the doors did not open. Instead, the stars beyond the crystal ceiling shifted. Shadows appeared where there had been light. Dozens of points dark against the galaxy's glow moved into position. At first, the delegates thought it was a natural phenomenon. A passing cloud of asteroids, a strange distortion of light. Then the shadows lit up with engines. They were ships, colossal ships. The hall fell into panic. Messages flooded in from orbital stations. Unknown contacts had entered the system. Their size defied measurement. Their hulls were black, armored, jagged like blades. Along their sides, red and blue lights flickered like the pulse of a predator. "Impossible," gasped a scholar. "No human fleet is this large." The first readings arrived. The numbers made no sense. Each ship carried more mass than entire battle groups of the known empires. Their weapons could not be identified. Their energy signatures broke every law of engineering the galaxy understood. And yet, they were human. The speaker shouted, demanding order, but the delegates ignored him. Some called for their fleets to prepare for battle. Others whispered that the humans were bluffing. But above the hall, the truth was clear. The humans had not come to talk. One massive ship drifted closer, its silhouette covering the crystal ceiling until the stars disappeared. The hall darkened under its shadow. For the first time in decades, even the most powerful warlords felt fear. Inside the chamber, an old insectoid monarch hissed, "This is a peace conference. They dare arrive in warships?" A feathered diplomat replied in a shaking voice, Perhaps they do not come to join us. Perhaps they come to end us." The hall froze as a signal cut across every screen, every translator, every comm. A single message carried on a human voice. Calm, cold, certain. "We once asked for peace. You denied us. Now you will listen." The voice ended. Silence followed. Not even the guards dared to breathe. Above them, the human fleet remained still. Dozens of titanic warships, larger than anything the galaxy had ever built, hung in formation. They did not fire. They did not move. Their silence was more terrifying than any weapon. Whispers filled the chamber. How long have they been hiding this? How did they build this? Some claimed the humans had made alliances in secret. Others said they had discovered ancient technology. A few whispered the darkest rumor of all, that humanity had always been preparing for this day and every empire had underestimated them. The speaker tried once more to calm the assembly, but his voice shook. They cannot mean to threaten us all. This is madness. Yet the evidence was undeniable. The peace talks had already failed. The galaxy's future had shifted in a single moment. The youngest species of the stars had arrived, and they had not come with words. They had come with a fleet, the galaxy's arrogance. The hall remained dark under the shadow of the human fleet. Silence pressed against the delegates like a weight. For a moment, it seemed no one would dare speak. Then, one of the reptilian warlords broke the stillness with a sharp laugh. "This is a trick," he hissed. His scaled fingers tapped on the table, claws clicking in defiance. "Humans play with shadows. Their ships are hollow frames. Their power is an illusion." His words gave courage to others. The insectoid monarch raised her long, gleaming limbs and declared, "No young race can rise so far so quickly. We have ruled the stars for thousands of years. If they had such strength, we would have known." Agreement rippled through the chamber. Feathered diplomats spread their wings in dismissal. Cold-eyed scholars shook their heads and muttered about human arrogance. Even those who had first trembled now found comfort in their own disbelief. "They are still children," another voice sneered. 100 years ago, they could not even leave their own star. Do we fear children? Laughter filled the chamber. The speaker tried again to bring order, but the sound of mockery drowned him out. To the empires of the galaxy, humanity was still a minor race from a forgotten corner. The sight of their fleet was frightening, yes, but pride is louder than fear. Above them, the human ships remained still. Their silence made every word of arrogance feel thinner, weaker. Yet none of the delegates admitted this truth. Pride forced them to believe what fear whispered was false. Reports flooded in from orbital stations. Sensor readings continued to break logic. The ships were too heavy, their energy cores too powerful, their shields beyond all known science. But still the leaders scoffed. "They falsify the readings," the reptilian lord said. "No machine of theirs can eclipse ours." The insectoid monarch snapped her limbs together in agreement. "Let them stay. Let them watch. They will learn they are nothing." In the shadows of the hall, a quiet voice rose. It belonged to a diplomat from a minor avian world, a people too weak to ever hold power. His feathers trembled as he spoke. What if they are not lying? The room turned on him at once. Warlords laughed, scholars jeered, and monarchs hissed in disgust. "Silence, coward," one growled. "Do not speak fear into this chamber." The avian diplomat lowered his head, shamed into silence, but his question hung in the air like smoke. Beyond the crystal ceiling, the ships moved. Not many, only a few. Massive human vessels drifted closer, their hulls covered in rows of glowing ports. Each line of light pulsed like the breath of a predator. The hall quieted again. Every eye turned upward. A message came from the fleets in orbit. A warning. The humans had opened channels. The speaker's heart sank. He raised his hand and signaled the transmission. At once the chamber filled with a human voice. Calm, unshaken. "We offered peace once. You refused. We do not come to ask again." The voice was male, deep, and steady. It was not loud, yet it carried more weight than the shouting of the entire chamber. "You will listen," the voice said, "or you will fall." Then silence. The delegates broke into chaos. Some shouted for the humans to be punished. Others demanded they be expelled from the system. Yet others, quieter but more fearful, whispered of surrender. The reptilian warlord slammed his claws onto the table, his eyes burning. "They dare threaten us in our own hall? They are nothing. I demand their fleet be fired upon." But even as he roared, his own fleet's commanders hesitated. The reports from sensors were undeniable. Human ships carried weapons beyond comprehension. The warlord's soldiers whispered of doom if they attacked. Still arrogance blinded him. He turned to the speaker, shouting, "If you will not act, my people will. We will burn their hollow shells and scatter them as dust." The insectoid monarch raised her limbs high. "Yes, show these humans their place. We will remind them of the order of the galaxy." the chamber filled with cheers from those too proud to admit fear. Yet outside, the stars told a different truth. The human fleet remained motionless, their silence heavier than any threat. The avian diplomat, voice shaking, whispered again, "What if silence is the greatest weapon of all?" No one listened. Instead, orders were sent. Fleets prepared to move. Across the system, warships belonging to ancient empires shifted toward human vessels. Weapons powered, shields rose, and targeting arrays locked on. But humanity did not flinch. Their ships stayed still, waiting, as if they had expected this. The chamber buzzed with excitement. The arrogant laughed, imagining human ships torn apart. They forgot centuries of war. They forgot the lesson of underestimation. They forgot that silence can hide teeth sharper than any roar. The speaker lowered his head in despair. He knew the peace talks were broken. The dream of conquered had ended, pride had won, and pride would bring ruin. As fleets outside prepared to fire, the galaxy's greatest mistake was about to unfold. Humanity's warning. The fleets of the old empires moved into position. Their engines burned white, their weapons charged, and their commanders shouted over open channels declaring that humanity had no right to threaten them. The chamber of the conquered filled with noise, each empire demanding action, each leader more arrogant than the last. But outside, the humans did not move. Their dark ships hung in the void like ancient statues. Their engines pulsed slowly, glowing with cold blue fire. Not one weapon lit, not one formation broke. It was as if they were waiting. A single ripple of static crossed every comm. The noise inside the hall froze. Translators stuttered, screens flickered, and then one voice cut through the chaos. It was human, calm, steady, dangerous. "You ignored us when we begged for peace," the voice said. "You laughed at us when we asked for a place in your councils. You called us children. You called us weak. Today you will listen." The chamber fell silent. Even the warlords who moments before had roared with pride now sat stiff in their seats. The voice was not loud, yet it carried weight, as if the stars themselves were speaking. The reptilian warlord forced a laugh, though it sounded weaker now. "They think words can frighten us. Let us fire and end this game." But even his own officers hesitated. Reports came faster and faster. Human ships carried weapons beyond their understanding. Readings showed energy so dense it should have torn the vessels apart. Yet the ships remained calm, steady, silent. The insectoid monarch hissed in frustration. "They bluff. Fire and see." Above, the largest human vessel shifted. Its hull gleamed with a strange pattern, light crawling across its surface like veins of fire. Then, without warning, the entire sky lit up. It was not a weapon. It was a display. Lines of light stretched across the void, forming a massive grid that spanned the entire system. Every starship in orbit, every station, every satellite was caught within it. The aliens watched as human ships projected something no one had ever seen before, a barrier that encircled the system itself. The feathered diplomat gasped. They have sealed us in." The chamber erupted again. Panic, rage, disbelief. Leaders shouted that the barrier was impossible. Scholars screamed that it defied all known science, but none of their words changed the truth. Humanity had locked the entire system inside a cage of light. The human voice returned, still calm, still steady. "You will not leave. You will not fight. You will listen. We offered peace once and you denied it. Now peace will come on our terms." The speaker of the Concord rose to his feet, his voice breaking with desperation. "This is madness. Humanity cannot dictate peace to the galaxy. You will destroy everything." For the first time, the human voice shifted. It grew harder, colder. "We will destroy nothing. But if you force us, we will end everything." Silence followed. The delegates looked at one another with wide eyes. For the first time, no one laughed. No one mocked. The reptilian warlord slammed his claws on the table, trying to recover his pride. "They lie. They do not have the will. Fire on them!" And so one fleet obeyed. Ships from his empire lit their weapons, targeting the nearest human vessel. Beams of energy struck. Missiles streaked across the void. The conquered chamber filled with shouts, some cheering, some begging for calm. But when the fire struck, the human ship did not even shudder. The energy vanished against a shield that glowed faintly for only a moment. Missiles exploded in silence, leaving no mark. Then, for the first time, the humans answered. A single pulse of light left the massive vessel. It was not fast. It was not loud. It was almost gentle. It struck the attacking fleet, and in an instant hundreds of alien ships vanished. No wreckage, no flames, no escape pods. They were simply gone. The chamber went silent. Every leader sat frozen, their faces pale. The human voice returned, softer than before, but far more terrifying. "Do not test us again." The insectoid monarch lowered her limbs in silence. The reptilian warlord, once so loud, stared at the floor. Even the proudest among them felt their pride break like glass. The speaker tried to speak, but no words came. The weight of the moment was too heavy. Humanity had just shown what no empire could deny. They were no longer the young race. They were no longer ignored. They had arrived with power the galaxy could not match, and they demanded to be heard. Above, the fleets of humanity remained silent once more, their dark hulls drifting like shadows against the stars. They had not come for blood. Not yet, but every leader in the chamber understood. Humanity's warning was clear. Peace would come. But it would not be chosen. It would be enforced. The collapse. The Concord chamber was silent, but the silence did not bring peace. It was heavy, sharp, filled with fear. Every leader knew the truth now. Humanity was no longer a minor race. They were a force, and that force had already chosen the fate of the galaxy. Still, arrogance dies slowly. The reptilian warlord rose to his feet, his scales glistening with rage. His claws dug into the polished table. "We cannot kneel to them," he roared. "If we surrender, then every empire will fall. We must fight together." Some cheered, their pride still louder than their fear. The insectoid monarch clashed her limbs in agreement. "We are the rulers of the stars. We will not bend to upstarts from a dirt world." But others did not cheer. The feathered diplomats folded their wings close, their voices low. You saw what they did. One pulse and an entire fleet was erased. "If we fight, we will all vanish." The speaker pressed his hands against the table, his voice trembling. "Peace was our only hope, but peace is gone. The talks are broken. All that remains is choice, obedience, or death." The chamber erupted into shouting again. Warlords demanded battle. Diplomats begged for surrender. Old alliances cracked, each empire accusing the others of cowardice. The hall that was meant for peace became a battlefield of words. Above, the human fleet still waited. More ships entered the system. One after another, massive silhouettes appeared from the dark. They moved into perfect formation, their hulls shining with cold blue light. Hundreds of vessels now surrounded the system, their presence crushing the hope of escape. Panic spread among the empires. Fleets tried to retreat, but every path was blocked. Human ships moved silently into position, sealing off the exits like hunters circling prey. Then came the final blow. The humans transmitted a single image across every screen, every translator, every device. It was simple. A map of the galaxy, each empire marked in its colors. Then slowly the map shifted. All the empires faded until only one color remained. Humanity's. The message was clear. The speaker fell silent, his face pale. "They claim everything. The whole galaxy." Fear took root in the hall. Some leaders screamed in rage. Others collapsed in despair. For centuries, the galaxy had fought to decide who ruled. Now the answer was here. None of them. Only humanity. One empire dared to resist. A coalition of ships from 3 old powers moved together, their fleets forming a spearhead against the humans. Their commanders shouted that they would strike first, that they would prove the humans mortal. The chamber leaned forward in dread as the battle began. Alien ships surged forward, weapons blazing, energy burning bright against the void. The humans did not answer at first. They let the fire come, let the weapons crash against their shields. Then, with no warning, a single human vessel unleashed its power. A beam of white light tore across the stars. It was not fast. It was not chaotic. It was clean, sharp, final. The coalition fleet simply disappeared. Thousands of ships, thousands of lives gone in one stroke. The chamber froze. No one shouted now. No one laughed. Even the proud warlords sat in silence, their arrogance shattered. The human voice returned colder than before. "The wars end today. You will not fight again. If you try, you will share their fate." The speaker lowered his head, his voice breaking into a whisper. "The peace talks are ended. Humanity has ended them." The insectoid monarch trembled, her limbs lowering for the first time. "What are we now?" she asked softly. "Subjects. Prisoners?" No one answered. The galaxy's leaders, once so mighty, now sat powerless. They had mocked the humans. They had ignored them. They had underestimated them. Now their arrogance had brought collapse. Above, the human fleet spread wider, ships moving into every orbit, every path, every corner of the system. Their silence was no longer just threatening. It was final. The chamber of the conquered, built to unite the stars, had become a tomb for pride. The old order was broken. Humanity had risen. The new order, the chamber no longer roared with shouts. The proud voices of the galaxy's leaders had fallen into silence. Fear filled the room, heavier than stone. The fleets that had dared to resist were gone, erased in a single strike of white light. No wreckage remained, no survivors, nothing to bury. Every delegate knew the truth now. The old order was broken. The age of rival empires was finished. Humanity had taken the stars. The speaker of the Concord looked at the dark fleet above, his hands trembling against the polished table. For centuries he had watched warlords fight for power, monarchs battle for pride, and diplomats fail to hold peace together. Now in one moment everything had changed. The youngest species had forced peace upon them all. The human voice returned, colder than steel. The wars are over. The galaxy belongs to peace. Not by your choice, but by ours. No one dared answer. Even the reptilian warlord, once so fierce, lowered his gaze. The insectoid monarch kept her limbs folded close, her pride shattered. Across the hall, the feathered diplomats closed their wings in surrender. No one argued. No one mocked. The silence itself was submission. Above the chamber, the human ships spread out. They did not need words. Their movement was the new law. Every path through space was blocked. Every exit was sealed. Hundreds of massive vessels drifted into position, each one watching, each one waiting. The galaxy had never seen such unity of power. Then the message shifted. It was no longer just a voice. Holograms filled the chamber. They showed images of planets scarred by endless wars. Colonies burned, fleets destroyed. The galaxy had fought itself for centuries, leaving nothing but ruin. And then the holograms changed. They showed human cities rebuilt after war, vast shipyards, silent and efficient, hidden in the dark corners of space. Entire worlds working together in silence, forging weapons and ships unlike any the galaxy had imagined. You fought for centuries, the human voice said. You destroyed your worlds. You broke every treaty. You chose pride over peace. We watched. We learned. And we built. Now you will not choose again. We choose for you. The delegates shivered. The truth was clear. Humanity had never been weak. Humanity had been patient. While the empires fought one another, humans had prepared. And now the preparations had ended. The speaker tried to lift his voice. What do you demand of us? The answer came at once: obedience. The fleets will not disband. Your armies will not rise. The conquered is dissolved. From this day there is only one law. You will fight no more. The chamber filled with whispers. Some were relieved. Others were broken. But no one refused. Not anymore. The memory of the vanished fleets was still too fresh. One feathered diplomat finally raised her head, her voice soft. And if we disobey? The human voice did not rise. It did not need to. Then you will vanish as they did. No one spoke again. Above, the human fleet drifted across the stars, their engines glowing faint blue, their silence heavier than any roar of weapons. The galaxy's leaders stared at the ceiling, at the dark shadows blotting out the light of the stars, and knew their future was no longer their own. On distant worlds, alien soldiers laid down their arms. Fleets stood down. Armories went silent. Orders from the conquered no longer mattered. The only orders that mattered now came from the fleet above. For the first time in centuries, the wars ended. Planets that had burned now fell into uneasy silence. Trade routes reopened under human escort. Borders that had once sparked bloodshed no longer mattered. Humanity had redrawn the galaxy with one act of power. But the silence carried unease. The empires whispered among themselves. Was this peace? Or was it conquest? The speaker, his voice thin, asked the question that weighed on every heart. Are you our rulers now? The human reply came like a shadow across the stars. We are not rulers. We are guardians. But if you resist, we will be your end. The message ended. The holograms faded. The chamber sat in darkness, the stars hidden behind the hulking shapes of human ships. And so it was decided. The galaxy had wanted peace, but not like this. Now peace had come, not by choice, not by trust, but by force. Humanity had risen from silence, and in one day the mighty had fallen. From that day, the galaxy lived under a new order. Not an order built on treaties or oaths, not an order chosen by the old empires, but an order forged in silence, carried by shadows, and enforced by the unstoppable fleets of Earth. The empires would never forget the day the peace talks collapsed. They would never forget the day humanity arrived, and they would never forget the shadow that now watched them from the stars.